Oh, my mind, now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. Oh, my mind, now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. You got control of me, break my barricades. Walls are crumbling, grows they shake. You came to save. That's what you said. Every single time you stay our case.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Neurodivergent News. Today we are going to have a wonderful show, but a little bit about myself first. I am Deanna Brakefield, owner of Lionheart Kingdom Marketing. I got into doing this radio because someone told me that marketing was boring, and that's great because talking about quirkiness is so much more fun. So today I have with me an amazing woman. She runs her own business. She helps kids define what their future is going to look like and helps them achieve their dreams. I have with me the college admissions strategist, Kelly Kellem.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Deanna. I'm really excited to talk about neurodivergence. And I know that this is not something that's often talked about. And I love that you're doing this. So this is fabulous. Happy to be here today.
Well, tell us a little bit about you to start with. I know that you're married and I know you run your own business. What should we know about you?
Well, in addition to being married and running my own business, I foster dogs, which is a lot of fun. That's a hobby of mine and a heart, a labor of love. But I also am a step parent. And I've got technically three stepdaughters. One is 27, almost 28. I've got two that are, well, one just went to college a year ago. So she's a sophomore in college.
Oh,
And she's actually part of how I got started in my business. And then I have a stepson who is a senior in high school.
we have one the same age. I have a senior in high school too.
Yeah.
Didn't know you had one so young.
I know. Yeah. So the other thing that one would want to know about me is I have two pit bulls, which always surprises people.
Pit bulls, really?
Yes, they're my favorite breed. They are the most gentle, unless they're bred to fight, they are amazing family dogs.
Okay. I've had a couple of Labradors, but we've never done, I guess I would consider a dangerous breed. I know a lot of people would, especially if they're afraid of dogs, like I am, but I've heard they can be sweethearts.
They are absolute sweethearts. One of my dogs, people actually say, is kind of an ambassador for the breed. She's never met anybody who didn't like her. She's also never met anybody she didn't like. But yes, you're right. They're considered bully breeds along with several other breeds of dogs. And they, if somebody's afraid of dogs or if they listen to what the newspaper says about a pit bull type dog, they're going to be afraid of them. But they're very sweet dogs.
Well, Miss Kelly, I'm going to just jump right in, and I don't believe in segues because, like so many neurodivergents, I struggle with them. So tell us, how did you get started with college admissions? It's not a typical field that you hear about.
No, it's not something that people hear about very often, but I came about it through three steps in life. I am a former teacher, and when I was teaching high school, we always are required to help students, by checking their essays, reading their essays, and giving them feedback. And there were some students that were not even putting together college essays, and I asked about it, and they would say just, well, I'm not going to college. We can't afford it. In hindsight, I know that they were first generation Americans or their family was first generation American and they did not know about the financial aid system or the college system. And this was in California back when it wasn't super expensive to go to college in California either. So then fast forward to many years later, I became a financial coach and was talking to families that not only had decades old student loans, but were talking about taking out more loans for their own kids that were coming up to college. And now it was just heartbreaking. And there's only so much you can do to help them if they're going to take out more debt, hundreds of thousands of debt. So my own stepdaughter, the second stepdaughter, was getting ready to go to high school. She was in seventh or eighth grade at the time. And so we were trying to figure out how to pay for that. I also was doing tons of research and I knew that there were options So it just so happened that my husband and I got on a call with and I'm going to say a so-called college financial expert who told us that the only way my stepkids were going to go to college, given what we had set aside for them, was if we either sold our modest home or we took out a line of credit against the home. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. We got off the call and my husband looked at me as we were still both in shock. And he said, you've done all this research, you've got the financial background. Why don't you just pivot your business and do this? And that is how I got started. And truthfully, my whole business was initially based around my stepdaughter because she was going through that process from eighth grade through high school. And now, of course, she's a sophomore in college.
So, wow, I mean, that's an incredible story. I always love to hear stories where real life experience turns into passion. And it seems like that's exactly what you've done.
It is. I'm on a mission now to help other families figure out not only how to go to college without rating their retirement, which literally happens sometimes. I'm also trying to help students get into the right school for them so that they're happier, they're more successful. That's part of why students come out without the right degree or they end up dropping out is they're just not happy there because it's not the right school.
Now, that actually brings up a really important point because for the neurodivergent student, the way they experience college is very, very different from the way a neurotypical experiences it. What does the admissions process look like for them, and how does it differ from a typical?
That's a really good question. In terms of finding the right school, it is a little bit different because you also want to find a school that offers some sort of support. Now, for some neurodivergents, and I'm going to use a term that's not often used now, but the schools still use it. And there's one school that I'm aware of that actually has a separate area, campus, separate dorms, separate classes for students who are autistic. And then there are, of course, a lot of schools that offer support for students on the spectrum or ADHD students. There are even schools out there that have executive functioning coaches. The school that my stepdaughter's at, Augustana College, she's not there because of that feature, but they have executive function coaches. And to me, that's really important because I think that's extremely hard for kids going into college, especially if they're neurodivergent. But I'm going to be honest, sometimes even the typical student has issues with executive functioning that they can still use support for. So really looking for a lot of support. Sometimes it's a situation where, students actually need to go to disability services as much as we don't want to call it that. That's what the colleges call it. That's the office you go to. And finding out what accommodations are available for students. I mean, sometimes in fact, I was talking to somebody today about that. Sometimes they need to find a school that offers audio textbooks. Sometimes they need to find a school that gives accommodations on testing, gives them more time. Occasionally, you'll even find that students need additional tutoring, not because they're not intelligent, because they're having problems focusing on the subject area, focusing on their work. And you asked about the admissions process. Truthfully, the admissions process is no different. It's really about finding the right fit college, and then the rest of the admissions process is just fine. One thing that there's two schools of thought about whether you tell the college up front before you're admitted that you're going to need accommodations, or if you wait until after you're admitted to go ask for the accommodations. But either way, if the school offers the accommodations, that's the key thing right there.
That was actually
And
my next question is, do you see, I know it used to be fairly prevalent, do you still see discrimination against wanting to admit students that need accommodations?
I appreciate your word discrimination because that was the case. But I don't think it's so much discrimination against them needing the accommodations today as a lot of schools, if you tell them you need accommodations, you may be talking to a school that's not set up for those accommodations. And then they'll say, well, if this student needs these accommodations and we don't have them, this is not the best student for our school. And that would be true.
Mm.
That would be absolutely true because they're going to struggle without the accommodations that they need. But the other thing to know, and again, this is something that somebody reminded me of today, you have to know what accommodations you need when you go to talk to the office about it. It's not something they're going to offer you, even if they have those accommodations, they're not going to offer it. They're going to need you to come and say, hey, I need this, this, and this. I was actually at a presentation at one of the colleges I visited, and a student, and I give her a lot of credit, she raised her hand from the back of a huge auditorium and said, I have anxiety. I need my own room. I have an emotional support animal. Is this going to work? And of course, this was Augustana. And so they said, yes, absolutely. And she was going to have to go through a separate housing process, but it wasn't a difficult thing. So it's really just knowing what you need. And I think that's the barrier because sometimes families don't understand what's available to them.
Do you find that accommodations are more easily accessible at larger universities or smaller ones?
Smaller universities. Personally, yes. And when I say that, I'm usually talking about private schools. Private schools, you are more likely to get more accommodations. You're also, because you're more likely to get one on one, not one on one attention, but because you're more likely to get a smaller student to teacher ratio, you will get a little bit more one-on-one attention, or you will get more tutoring from, if not the teacher, then somebody else who they assign to you. A lot of these schools actually assign students to upper class mentor, and they might even start having students with a faculty advisor freshman year on. Usually the faculty advisor isn't assigned until junior year.
Okay. So you've given us a lot of great information about what college starts, or at least beginning college starts to look like for a neurodivergent student. Now, I hope you don't mind me calling you out a little bit, but in our private interview, you were very candid with me. Would you mind sharing your own story with us?
Sure, absolutely. I do definitely have issues with executive function skills, also emotional regulation, which is not uncommon for anybody that is neurodivergent. And truthfully, this is something I don't talk a lot about, but when I was 2.5 or 3, I was diagnosed as the word they used back then was autistic. Now, I didn't really know that for several years, but should have been obvious to everybody that was around me at the time because there were a lot of not neurological deficits, but motor control, motor function deficits, speech deficits. I didn't speak until my first birthday. I mean, didn't say anything. And then didn't speak for a while after that. I never learned to crawl, and it took me a while to even learn how to walk. So there were a lot of things going on. As a result, I think because of when I was growing up, there was a lot of shaming around it. My mother didn't want anybody to know. That's why I didn't know for several years until my dad accidentally said something. But uh, my mom made sure that I knew how to write by the time I was 4 years old, and I could read some things and I could do a number of things because she didn't understand that what it really meant, first of all. But we kept it quiet my entire life. And so when it came to social interaction, because I do have just some differences in the way that I socialize with people, my mom actually didn't know that keeping me away from people was going to make that worse because back then people didn't know what they didn't know about it. So she actually kept me home a lot of the time, and I never went to like preschool, never went out to play with kids after school. I just was pretty much kept isolated, which only makes social differences more pronounced.
It doesn't really help with the stigmas that are associated because it almost confirms what everybody suspects about
Mhm.
you.
Right, right. And so that was a lot of pressure on me too. I knew something was going on. I didn't understand what the situation was.
I mean, it sounds like your mother was kind of your cushion as well as your advocate, which I know that for a lot of parents like myself, that's a tricky line. How much do you protect your child that is just a little bit different than everybody else versus how much do you push them out of their comfort zone so that they can start to compensate as they get older?
Absolutely. And I think that's really important is to give them both pieces of that. And especially as they get a little older, pushing them out, letting them have more independence. By the time I graduated from high school, I still didn't have a lot of confidence. I didn't have a lot of belief in what I could do because, and again, I'm not bashing my mother. She was trying to protect me.
Mhm.
And as a result, I didn't get the chance to build these skills and this independence myself. I think today we do a much better job of helping kids with that, even in the high schools.
I
But
completely agree. The landscape is completely different even from 20 years ago. I can't even imagine the difference back when you were growing up through the system. That seems like a nightmare scenario to me, even though I've heard so many stories about it.
yeah.
So on a little bit of a lighter, funner note, something that I like to ask everyone is, all of us neurodivergents, we tend to develop hobbies or ticks that are just a little bit out there, a little bit different. So what is your strangest hobby that you've developed, Miss Kelly?
Well, the strangest hobby that I've developed, I do like to, I have an herb garden like many people. One of the things that I like to grow is medicinal herbs. And no, I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about things like lemon balm that can be used for relaxation. I'm talking about, I can't think of it right now, but it's a really leafy plant. Oh, mullein, a really leafy plant that helps with breathing problems like coughs and that sort of thing, asthma. So I like to grow that kind of thing. And I also am one of the few people I know who grows dandelions on purpose because they are completely edible. Leaves are actually you can use those in a salad. And by the way, if you go to a fancy restaurant, they often do serve dandelion salad. The roots are great when they're ground up for, treating allergies. And I've actually made a salve out of the flowers in oil, in olive oil. So that's my weird hobby.
How long have you been gardening?
Not long, not long. And believe it or not, I don't actually like gardening and I'm not very good at it. But I think I started this about 5 years ago. And it was 3 years ago that I started growing the dandelions.
I have to say, dandelion tea is just about the bitterest thing I have ever tried in my entire life.
I've never had it. I don't want it. I know that it's really good. I've made it for my dog because she has really bad allergies. And it's something that you make the kind of like a tincture, and I've poured it over her food. And it really does seem to help. And she doesn't mind the flavor of it. I mean, she's a dog, right?
Yeah, as long as you don't give them lemons, they're typically okay.
Yes, yes.
Oh, Miss Kelly, so tell me a little bit about your actual business because I know that you've actually got two really big things going on, and that's your Kelly Kellem college admissions strategist. But I also know that you have your own radio show on K Fred here, so I'd love to hear about both.
Sure. Yes, as I mentioned, I helped kids get into the right fit school. Huge. Help prepare them for college so that they're set up for success through high school. By the way, by doing it that way, kids are more likely to get a lot of money from the colleges. I have a student I just got texted yesterday by a mom. Her son just got I think it was $46,000 a year at one of the colleges, but maybe it was only 40,000, but it's $160,000 over 4 years.
Right?
And that's money they're not gonna pay for him to go to college. They still will have a little bit out of pocket. So that's really what I do, and then I help people on the back end filling out the FAFSA. I don't fill it out for them, I just give them some information, and then appealing financial aid, which is something most people don't even know they can do. So on the KFRED side, I do talk about all of that in my show, and I shouldn't say my show because I have a co host. Liz Lewine, my co host, is a career coach for teens and young adults, and she actually specializes in working with students who have decided to take an alternative path to college, like a gap year or going to trade school or just going directly into the workforce. So the two of us together, we cover the whole gamut we can help students whether they're going to college or not going to college. And we do start young with, like 8th grade going on up. And the name of our show is Beyond the Books Teen Success Secrets. And it airs on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Pacific here on KFRED.
Amazing. It sounds like the two of you have a unique relationship, very yin and yang.
We do. And it allows us to educate families on a lot of different things.
So I know Miss Lawine as well, and I know she is also neurodivergent. How do you find that that helps the two of you work together, and how does it hurt? How does it make it harder?
Well, I mentioned the whole executive functioning, emotional dysregulation. We've had some, I don't want to call them arguments, but we've had some tense moments recently because that's just the way that happens with two neurodivergent people. It's just we're not as calm and as rational as some people. And when I say rational, I mean not as, we get more emotional, I think. And so we get tied up in that emotion. And so we've had some tense conversations. That's not unusual. In fact, she and I were talking about that last night. The way that it benefits us is that we have to figure out what our strengths are and work to our strengths. When we work to our strengths, she has one area that she's just really good at. I tend to be a little more on the tech side, and you're going to laugh when you hear that because I am not good with technology. For the listeners, I've actually had a couple of tech meltdown moments with Deanna, but of the two of us, I'm the more technical. So I do things like do the editing and the recording, the editing, and just anything that requires uploading the show to the podcasts, etc. We do find that we have to really focus ourselves. It's really important for us to manage our time, which is not easy for neurodivergent people.
Okay.
We have to schedule everything and we have to go into it with a plan. Okay, this is what we're going to accomplish today.
Okay.
Now, this is what we want to get out of this particular meeting. This is when we want to have the shows laid out for, we've got topics for about the next quarter, maybe beyond. And so now we're looking at when they're going to happen in order. We have to be very logical and very intentional about things because as neurodivergents, if we didn't do that, especially since we both have issues with executive functioning skills, we'd never get anything done. But there is a way to cope very effectively with some of these challenges. And it's very possible for people who are neurodivergent to run a business. I mean, Liz has her own business. I have my business. It's very possible. Yes, you have your own business.
I mean, you're right. It's very possible. Success looks a little different for everyone that's out there, but just because you're neurodivergent doesn't mean success is out of your reach.
I do find that I have to break tasks down. Like I have the viewers or the listeners can't see this, but I have this pad of paper that has your focus areas, and then it also breaks everything down. For example, I have a calendar I'm putting together for pre-interview for pre-interviews for our podcast, and I have everything written down here, broken into small tasks. So I know everything I have to do. Otherwise, it's just too big a task. And a lot of us just sit there with this overwhelm. So you just have to work to your strength and figure out how to overcome that overwhelm. And then it's all possible.
Amazing. Now, do you find that you function better with the handwritten tools, or have you explored some of the tech tools?
I have definitely explored some of the tech tools. I do prefer handwritten. This sheet of paper that I was showing you, Deanna, is handwritten. I do better with that because as a neurodivergent, my brain, especially with ADHD, my brain will just come up with something. And if I don't write it down right away, I won't remember it. I can't be flipping back and forth between computer screens doing that.
Mhm.
I need something right there that I can just take pen and paper and write it down very quickly. I do use Google Calendar because my calendar program, Calendly, puts everything directly into Google Calendar. And that way I can manage both my personal and my business calendar all in one place. That's about the only tech tool I use right now, except I am starting to use more tech tools for, say, editing the show.
Right.
And I'm also starting to use a CRM, customer relationship management program. The problem I have with that is my brain doesn't work with Excel spreadsheets. It doesn't work with anything that is very rigid like that. It needs to be a little more free form. And I know you also like what is that program? I'm sorry that you've put some things into. You use it for our groups for the calendars.
Google Sheet.
Oh, Google Sheets and then also Trello.
Yes.
A lot of people really that are neurodivergent really like Trello. So those are just some ways of, figuring out how to make things work.
There are plenty of tools and resources out there. You just got to find the one that's right for you.
Absolutely.
Well, we are nearly at time today, Miss Kelly. Do you have coming events or anything that we should be aware of and on the lookout for?
Sure. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to offer this to your listeners. I am starting a group coaching program for families of students who are believe they are going to be college bound. And I say that because they might start pretty young in the program and not know for sure if they're college bound, but part of it will help them figure that out. But it's going to be a monthly subscription sort of thing where they can drop in, get some information, come back later if they don't need everything right away. And this will give families an opportunity to get through this stressful college planning process and even the financial process. And I do coach a number of students who are neurodiverse. So that's also really helpful for them as well. And I do somewhat cater parts of my program to the needs of students who are neurodivergent. That program, by the way, is going to be starting end of October.
So, how do they get in touch with you if they're interested in that or your services in general?
Well, they can text college to 847-997-1449. And again, that's 847-997-1449. Or they can email me at kelly@yourcollegemoneycoach.com.
And all of Kelly's contact information will also be available in the blog when this episode is posted up. So be looking for that. She is an absolutely amazing woman and absolutely has my endorsement, not just as a business owner, but as a neurodivergent woman who has seen her own personal brand of success. I'd like to thank you again, Kelly, for being here with us today. I would like to thank all of our audience for listening, and everybody have a glorious day.